And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us for yet another edition of our live streams here. Now we're going to go ahead and go over the NFL season predictions. I've got my Super Bowl picks all pretty much set for you guys as well. Got divisions, records as well, and then also have some coaches firing I'm predicting by the end of the season as well. So we'll go through a whole bunch of this. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's start off in the AFC. AFC East anyway. Four teams, obviously, the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, New England Patriots, and the New York Jets. The bottom of the division, obviously, for me, is the New York Jets. I could see them winning about 6 games this year. I think their defense and their offense are both much better. The question for me is still about Zach Wilson. I just don't think he's a good enough quarterback yet. Maybe he proves us wrong by the end of the season, but as of right now, he's the worst quarterback in that division by a mile. And we'll see if Tony Romo's prediction of him being one of the best quarterbacks in last year's draft comes true. But for me, Jets are easily the 4th best team in the AFC East. Third goes to the New England Patriots. I just don't think Mac Jones has enough oomph, enough finesse to be able to get that team over the hump. I don't think they're going to be able to beat Miami this year. Miami's just loaded on both sides of the ball now. They have enough playmakers on defense to turn over the other team. And of course, their weapons now on offense are seriously legit. They brought in a new head coach, Mike McDaniel. Not really sure they needed to make a change, but they do bring in more of an offensive mind for Tua Tagovailoa to work with, as opposed to Brian Flores. Of course, Brian Flores came over from the New England Patriots years ago as a defensive coordinator and became the head coach there in Miami. But it sounds like it just wasn't good enough for the Miami Dolphins front office. We'll see how that Brian Flores lawsuit turns out as far as the hiring process and that kind of a thing. But as far as for what it means on the field, the New England Patriots just don't have enough weapons. I don't think they did enough in the offseason. They still have some good tight ends, but they haven't really done enough to address the concerns I have on both sides of the ball. I think this is still a slow, winding trail down for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. They're a long way away from what they were with Tom Brady, and I think you're just going to see that kind of cemented this year Belichick could leave at the end of the year. We'll get into that at the very end of the video, but I do see the Patriots finishing as third. That means second goes to the Miami Dolphins. Quite easily the second best team in this division in my mind. I just really like what they've done on both sides of the ball, bringing in Tyreek Hill. I like their running back tandem now with Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert. They still have Myles Gaskin there, but he's not going to play much. You saw how basically it was a 3 yards and a pile of dirt last year for Myles Gaskin. They get a lot better runners. The running game should be much better just with Mike McDaniel coming over from the San Francisco 49ers. So I fully expect the Dolphins to be right there in the postseason race. I don't think they have enough, though, to overtake the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are just far and ahead the best team in the NFL in my mind. So they're my number one in the AFC East anyway. Josh Allen, what else can you say? James, thanks for joining us yet again. Your pick is Bills versus Rams. Josh Allen is just too good after that loss to Mahomes last year. Watch out. I agree. I mean, there was nothing Josh Allen could have done other than basically what he already did in that game. I think he's just going to be a man possessed this year. I expect him to be the MVP favorite anyway at this point. But Josh Allen is just, he's going to play on another level this year. Their running game, while it isn't the best and their offensive line could be better, that defense is just, they've got too many playmakers. They do have some injury issues early in the season with Tre'Davious White, but I still think, even without Tre'Davious White, I still think they're going to go into L.A. tomorrow and beat the L.A. Rams. That's just how good of a team Buffalo has this year, and Josh Allen is just that good of a quarterback. So, without further ado, let's move on to the AFC North. Very difficult division. In fact, this is probably my toughest division outside of the AFC West in the whole NFL anyway. From top to bottom, all four teams could vie for a postseason spot. Now, of course, Cleveland is a little bit step back behind all of these teams in my mind, just because they're not going to have Deshaun Watson. I expect they'll try to push for that final wild card spot at the end of the season. I don't think they're going to be able to get there. But just looking at their team right now, I think they're easily the fourth best team just because of Jacoby Brissett being the starter. I think the inconsistent quarterback play is going to hold the Cleveland Browns back, and I think that ultimately could cost Kevin Stefanski his job. You'll have to pay attention to the end of the video to find out which coaches I have being fired this season. But Browns are easily the fourth best team. Third goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They haven't finished worse than 8-8 in any season with Mike Tomlin, and I don't think that changes this year. I think you're looking at another 8-8, a 9-8 team now that we have 17 game schedules anyway. But I think you're looking at a 9-8 team, 10-7, something like that with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mitch Trubisky, I think, will be a nice starter for them early on in the season. Allow Kenny Pickett to kind of learn from him, learn from those mistakes, see if he can learn to read defenses a little bit better by holding that clipboard, practicing against the ones, those kinds of things. I think they are going to split a lot of time in practice. That's why I think they waited so long to announce Trubisky as the starter. The one caveat I will mention is that Trubisky is named as a captain on this team. That means for me that this team has really kind of rallied around Trubisky as the starter, and I think they're going to try to give him at least some run early in the season. So I don't think he's going to be replaced after week 1 or week 2. I think you're looking probably in between week 6 and week 10 as possibly when you could see Kenny Pickett be the starter this season. But that's who I have as the third spot. That means there's two teams left. You have the Ravens and Bengals. I think the Ravens are the second best team just because I believe the experience that the Bengals gained in the postseason run that they had last year, the pieces that they helped improve that offensive line, they're ready to go. That defense could be a little bit better, which is why I'm not sure completely about them as a postseason, as far as a playoff team this year. But for me, the Ravens are the second best team. They have a lot of people coming back from injury. They're going to have a lot of rust. I expect Lamar Jackson to have some issues early on as well. But the contract issue hanging over his head, they've got a lot of storylines that they're going to have to pack into one season. I still think they're a very good team. I think they're still going to end up with probably 10-7, 11-6 wins, something like that. But for me, I think the Bengals are just one notch above. Joe Burrow, I think, ascended last year in the final 2 weeks of the season, and then in that playoff run that they had last year. Joe Burrow really proved something to me, And so I'm really excited to see what they do now that they're able to protect him a little bit better after bringing in La'el Collins and a couple other offensive linemen to help protect him. La'el Collins, one of the best right tackles in the game, came over from the Cowboys. They were willing to let him go because they wanted to save some salary cap space. The Browns were the beneficiary of the Cowboys shedding off salary by receiving Amari Cooper for a fifth-round pick. So both teams have benefited from the Cowboys jettisoning contracts. But for me, Ravens finish as the the number 2 team in the AFC North. Number 1, the Bengals. On the outside, I think they're going to have 2 of the top receivers in all of football this year in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Anyway, they have Tyler Boyd there in the slot as a third option just in case one of those 2 guys goes down. And Joe Mixon is nothing but steady at the running back spot and should see an improved workload anyway, an improved average rush anyway this year with that improved offensive line. So for me, Bengals 1, Ravens 2, Steelers 3, Browns 4 in the AFC North. To the AFC South, we'll start at the bottom. The 2 teams that have been vying for the cellar of that division for the last couple of years are going to vie for it again. However, both teams I see as vastly improved. I don't think either one of either the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Houston Texans are going to finish with less than 4 wins. I think at least 4 wins for the Texans this year. In fact, with Lovie Smith there, I'm hoping for 6 wins out of that team. I have a lot of faith in Davis Mills. I think he has a chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I'm just wondering if Houston is going to be willing to stick through it this year and possibly one more year. Then you're talking about a possibly top 10 quarterback if he continues his level of growth that he's had over the last year or so. We'll see if they continue to support him in that role. They do have a couple of first-round picks in the draft next year, so I'm not sure if they'll be overly patient with him, but I think he has all the tools there in him. When he was drafted a year early in the draft anyway, Mel Kiper said on the telecast if he had come out a year later, he very likely would have been a first-round pick in that draft. And the past draft anyway obviously saw the quarterback class that was there. But he came from Stanford, not necessarily as good of a prospect, obviously, as Andrew Luck or anything like that, but he's still a very solid quarterback. The running back position and Dameon Pierce should provide them with some consistency. They haven't had a very good rusher since back in the days of Arian Foster. Don't give me Lamar Miller. I mean, he wasn't a very good runner on that team or any one of the other running backs that they brought in over the last couple of years. David Johnson in the trade with DeAndre Hopkins. Dameon Pierce is so much better of a running back than any of those guys, and so I expect them to at least get at 4 wins. And I'm thinking maybe they get to 6-11, and that'd be a nice step up from what they have been over the last several years. Lovie Smith should have that defense working a little bit better. My question is that defense going to have enough pieces there as they've continued to turn it over and turn it over? They traded away Blacklock anyway to the Minnesota Vikings. Just before cutdown day, they moved a number of pieces out of that defense that were draft picks from the previous regime anyway. Nick Caserio really remaking that roster over the past 3-4 weeks just in cuts alone. And so I'm wondering if those are going to lead to unsteady play at the beginning of the season. But hopefully by week 6, week 7, they finally get their footing and start proving some doubters wrong. Third goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think they have a little bit better coach, a little bit more modern coach anyway, with Doug Peterson. Much better fit offensively, and he's not going to be, a child at the head coach spot like they had with Urban Meyer. Save all your Urban Meyer comments for now. This is about the 2022 season for the Jaguars. Doug Peterson, Super Bowl pedigree. That offensive line looks to be a little bit better as well. The defense was the calling card last year because that offense just couldn't get on the same page. Trevor Lawrence looked like a rookie quarterback last year. He showed me something in that final game, though, by keeping the Indianapolis Colts out of the playoffs last year. We saw how that ended up costing Carson Wentz a spot in Indianapolis, and Jim Irsay going off on him, not thinking that they should have lost that game at all, and I'll grant you they should not have. But Trevor Lawrence really proved something after they finally got rid of Urban Meyer and finally got this team really going in the right direction. The ETN is going to be back as far as a running back. They did bring in a couple of weapons as well. They brought in Evan Ingram as a tight end, a good pass-catching threat there. He hasn't proven much over the last couple of years. His best year, of course, was his rookie year, and his numbers have all been lower than that since then. But again, I wonder if that's more about the New York Giants offense just being completely anemic, or if that's more about Evan Ingram. We'll see this year. I think he's still going to be a very big target over the middle. And then the other piece that they did bring in was Christian Kirk. giving him $20 million a year to come in and be a slot receiver. That tells you you're probably going to be looking at 8 to 9 targets a game, maybe more, for Christian Kirk in this offense. They brought in Zay Jones as well. They kept Marvin Jones. They got rid of Chark. They got rid of Treadwell. They got rid of Laviska Shenault, who they sent on to the Panthers as well. That receiving core looks to be much better, and so I hope this team takes some strides this year. I think they're going to be probably one win ahead of the Texans, but I still think they're not going to be in postseason contention. So they're going to be the 3 seed in the AFC South. 2 is going to go to the Tennessee Titans. They had a lot of different issues go wrong with them as far as injuries last year, and still managed to put it all together and make it to the postseason. We saw them get bounced quickly. Now, of course, Tannehill is still the starter there. Malik Willis is still very raw, but I think he's probably the starter next season. And then we could really talk about Tennessee having some momentum going into the next season. But I think Tannehill's going to still hold down the fort there for the Titans anyway. And I still think they're an easy lock for a top 2 spot in the AFC South. But I still think the Colts are just one rung better than them. Their defense, I think, is just a little bit better. The issue, though, for the Colts is, are they still going to have that same effectiveness now that they lost their defensive coordinator in Eberflus to the Chicago Bears? Their quarterback position is much better, much more accurate, Matt Ryan, than Carson Wentz. Veteran at the helm. He's not exactly going to light anybody on fire, but he's still going to bring that steady Eddie approach, and that would have won them the division last year against the Titans because they had Carson Wentz is the reason why they didn't win the division last year. And so I think Matt Ryan is the difference between the Titans and the Colts as far as 1 and 2. The Titans are also very young at receiver after trading away A.J. Brown. They brought in Burks. They still have a very good running back in Derrick Henry, who's now the highest paid running back in the NFL, making $14 million this year. I think he's going to be worth every penny, but you got to worry about those injuries. Are they going to cut back a little bit on his workload to avoid those injuries and keep him fresh for the postseason if they're in the postseason? We'll see. But for my money, I still like Jonathan Taylor from the Colts anyway. I still like Michael Pittman now having a much more accurate passer. He should have a great year. So for those of you paying attention to fantasy football, you might want to keep your eye on Michael Pittman this year. But for me, Colts 1, Titans 2, Jaguars 3, Texans 4 in the AFC South. Finally, on to the AFC West. Everybody says this is the toughest division to pick anyway. I don't think so. I still think the AFC North was right up there anyway. But the AFC West has 4 legitimate teams that could all make the postseason. Don't get me wrong, but I still think there's a clear hierarchy in this division. First, we'll start at the bottom. We'll go with the Denver Broncos. I know a lot of you guys are, darlings of the, you think Denver's the darling of the division now. They got Russell Wilson anyway. They're going to be so much better. I'm not buying it. Russell Wilson, to me, had a down year last year, had injury issues. I still think he's significantly better than anything they've had for years with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, etc., playing quarterback last year. I just think they're going to be so much better with Russell Wilson. I think you're probably looking at a 9-win team, maybe even a 10-win team. But I still don't think they're going to be any better than the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't think they're going to be better than the Chargers or the Chiefs. I think the issues that they're going to have is, 1, adapting to a new offensive scheme with Hackett coming in, adapting to a new quarterback with Russell Wilson. Now, do I think they're still going to beat up on the bad teams? Absolutely. Do I still think their defense is great? Yes, I do, and I really like the addition of Randy Gregory on that defensive front. But I still think there's some holes. The trade that they made to get Russell Wilson there that cost them a lot of draft capital. It also cost them rotation pieces on the team. Tight end Noah Fant, a defensive tackle as well, Shelby Harris. There are going to be some holes on this team because of that trade, and I still think they could have done so much better than where they're at. But than the trade they made, I think they should have offered more first-round picks if they could have, instead of the just the 3 that they did, and keep those players on that roster and really go for a Super Bowl. I don't think Russell Wilson has that many good years left in him, but we'll see what ends up happening. But for me, the Broncos are a clear-cut number 4 out of those teams for me. 3 goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. They bring in a wide receiver. How often do you see a big-time wide receiver come into another team? And while they are still a great receiver, they're not necessarily as good as they were on their former team. The connection that Rodgers and Adams had was special. Do I think Carr could have a special connection with Adams? Absolutely. but I think it's going to take time. They're going to have a new offensive mindset there with McDaniels coming in. Jacobs isn't going to be the workhorse back in that offense anymore. They're going to rely on more of a committee, and so you're going to have a changing of the guard anyway with the Raiders. Carr is a very accurate quarterback. I wonder if McDaniels is going to change him up and make him a different quarterback than what he has been over the last couple of years anyway, with Gruden at the helm. Gruden, of course, no longer in football for reasons we won't get into now. But for my money, the Raiders are easily the third best team just because of all the changes they had to put up with last year and the changes they're going to have to deal with this year. Now, next year, we'll see how Adams does this year. But next year, with another year of McDaniels being at the helm, another year of Carr getting used to the new system there, I think they're really going to have, they're really going to have a chance to win that division, not just be the third place team in the division. Second for me goes to the Los Angeles Chargers nowadays anyway. For me, the defensive changes they made, bringing in Khalil Mack from the Chicago Bears, they re-signed Derwin James. It's all about injuries on that defensive front, which is why I think they're going to finish second. They're going to have some injuries throughout the season. Really like Austin Eckler. I love Keenan Allen. But again, injuries for me. Mike Williams outside is inconsistent at best at the wide receiver spot. They brought in Joshua Palmer, last year anyway. He should have a nice upgrade this year in production. But for me, that offensive line is still really good, but I wonder just how much better they are than the other teams in the division. For my money, they still have injury issues that they're going to hold them back. And so while they might have more talent on that side of the ball now, I think that the injury issues alone are going to keep them from being the number one team, which means the Kansas City Chiefs are yet again your division winners in the AFC West. I mean, they have Andy Reid, one of the best coaches in the NFL. I mean, he's still one of the best, even losing Tyreek Hill. I think this offense is not going to lose a beat. In fact, in some ways, I think it's going to be a better offense just because they're going to not look for that home run ball as much. I think they're going to be able to convert first downs at a much more steady pace. You're not going to see them put up 28 points in a quarter and then nothing for the rest of the game. I mean, that's what we saw last year on more than one occasion, and that's because they had Tyreek Hill there and they could try to go for the home run over and over and over again. And that leads to bad offensive series when you're not hitting that home run. But when you do hit it, hey, you can put up 28 points in a quarter. But when you don't, you're going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Because of that reason, I also think the defense is going to receive a boost. They saved the money on Tyreek Hill and were able to reinvest it in other spots. I like the receivers they did bring in. They got a lot of different players that they can use. For instance, Juju Smith-Schuster, he's been working with Ben Roethlisberger the last 2 years. I mean, just looking at the quarterbacks last year, where was Ben Roethlisberger on the list of best quarterbacks in the NFL? Quite possibly in the bottom 5 with those rookie quarterbacks, Zach Wilson, etc. I mean, the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger was exactly that, a ghost. And so Juju should have a significant upgrade working with Patrick Mahomes. Now, MVS does come from a good quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. I imagine he's going to fill a similar role in this offense. I was hoping we'd see an uptick in usage for Mecole Hardman. Sounds like MVS is beating him out for that spot as well. But Travis Kelce is where the bread and butter is going to be for this offense. The one piece to kind of keep an eye on for this offense is CEH. Does he finally get the workload that we had all been hoping for when he was drafted in the first round? Now that this offense is going to be a more steady, traditional offense, if you will. And I think the answer is an absolute yes. They do have several running backs behind him that they can turn to should he not live up to that potential yet again. But I think this is the first year you're really going to see what CEH can do in the NFL. So keep your eyes peeled for what could happen there. But for my money, Chiefs 1, Chargers 2, Raiders 3, and Broncos 4. On to the NFC side of the ball. Let's start in the NFC East. At the bottom of the division, I still have the New York Giants. That offense should be better with Daboll, but they still are working with Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor. That's going to be a very bad offense. I understand that everybody thinks their receiver group is great, and they do have some decent receivers. They've invested in it over the years. That offensive line is still absolutely a problem. The running back position, I don't like Saquon Barkley as your running back, mainly because injury issues. You can't count on him to be there, and because of the offensive line, he can run, he can get you an 80-yard touchdown, but most of the time it's going to be 2 yards in a pile of dust because of how bad that offensive line has been, and I don't see the improvement on that offensive line, in my opinion. Now, Daboll is an excellent offensive mind, so we should at least see some improved offensive play out of the Giants, but I think they're going to hold out for a quarterback in the draft next year. Should be a good quarterback draft next year, but this is easily the fourth best team in the division. Probably looking at a 5-12 team, 4-13, something like that. But I think they could pick up a win against the Commanders and some of the other poor teams in the NFC. Third goes to the Washington Commanders. I understand they have a great defense. That defense did not perform like it last year, and it sounds like Chase Young has re-aggravated an injury that he had during the offseason, attending Von Miller's camp, so that does not bode well for that defense. On the offensive side of the ball, Carson Wentz, while he isn't the greatest quarterback, is certainly an upgrade over what they had last year in Taylor Heinicke. And so I expect that offense to perform much better, but they're still no better than the Eagles or Cowboys. So they're easily the third best team. As far as a record, you're probably looking at a 7-10 team, honestly, in my opinion. And that's if they're able to get that defense to perform like they did last year. If they don't, then you could possibly see Ron Rivera out the door. He's a great coach, provides accountability, and that's an organization that needs accountability. But Dan Snyder's still the owner, and he wants to go to the playoffs, and I just don't think it's going to happen this year, even with the investment they make in Carson Wentz. At 2, this is going to surprise quite a few of you guys out there, most notably Stephen A. Smith of ESPN. I have the Philadelphia Eagles. This team is going to go as far as Jalen Hurts takes them, and while everybody seems to think Jalen Hurts is going to take that next step this year, I don't see it. I don't see him being able to throw the ball consistently down the field to A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. If you've watched any of my fantasy videos, I think that fantasy football-wise, he's going to be an absolute stud of a quarterback running the ball. That the running back room, anyway, isn't going to be very good with Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has already told you not to draft him in fantasy, so that tells you all you need to know about how good the rushing attack is going to be for Philadelphia. Philadelphia also is going over some turnover at that offensive line. You're looking at that offensive line. You got some older heads in there and some young guys that they're trying to mix in. I just don't think that they've got the right mix yet, but I still don't think this offense is going to be very good just because of Jalen Hurts. I think he's going to be a great rusher. I think he's going to be great in fantasy. Go ahead and draft him as one of your top 5 quarterbacks in fantasy, but I just don't see him being able to command this offense as a passer as opposed to a rusher. That's why the Eagles, I think themselves, realize this. That's why they traded their first-round pick this year to get a first-round pick next year from the Saints, just because they wanted to hedge their bets. And so they're going to have an extra first-round pick to try to move up in the draft next year for a quarterback of their liking. And so I think the Philadelphia Eagles are very cognizant of how good Jalen Hurts is and where his ceiling is at. They're going to give him another year because he did get into the playoffs last year unexpectedly. But again, that was more rushing the football, not necessarily finding open receivers down the field. They didn't involve Devontae Smith in the offense very well last year. They've had issues involving receivers in the past. Jalen Reagor, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. And while you might say that those guys, they're bums, maybe, but that still is on the quarterback to be able to throw them the ball. If they drop it, so be it. But I mean, you still have to be able to hit them in the hands, hit them in the numbers, and I just don't think Jalen Hurts has the ability to do it. A.J. Brown is the exception. I think he's just that good of a receiver. He's still going to be great, but for me, Jalen Hurts holds the Eagles back this year, and I think they're going to finish second in this division behind the Dallas Cowboys. And I understand I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. Don't get me wrong. The Cowboys traded away Amari Cooper. They let go of La'el Collins. They let go of Cedric Wilson, their third receiver in this offense. But they're still the Dallas Cowboys. They still have a decent offensive line, even with the injury to Tyron Smith at left tackle. They got a couple of in-house options that have been there for a couple of years that understand the offense in Josh Ball. They got a couple of rookies that they can turn to, in spots, but I still think this role is going to go to Josh Ball as the starter. And then just as insurance, they brought in Jason Peters, but that's not the reason why I think they're going to win the division. The biggest reason is their defense and Dak Prescott. Prescott, when he's under control in the pocket, he does not turn the ball over. Now, if they have issues at left tackle, they could bring in Peters and move him up to the starting lineup on game day. We'll see how that goes. It sounds like they're actually going to not even have a backup quarterback on the roster. They're going to elevate one from the practice squad on game day just to have a backup. That's going to be Cooper Rush. But Dak Prescott is going to be very good for the Cowboys this year. Ezekiel Elliott played last year with a big injury all year long anyway. From week 4 on, he was injured. I can't remember what it was. It was upper body. I want to say it was either shoulder or trap or something like that. Anyway, And he played all year with that injury and still had a very Ezekiel Elliott type of year. Now, was it an elite year? No. But now that he's healthy again, they still have Tony Pollard. That rushing attack should be much better. Zach Martin's healthy. The offense should still perform at an adequate level. They still have CeeDee Lamb. They brought in a rookie in Jalen Tolbert. And Michael Gallup is coming back from injury. He should probably play in week 2 or week 3. But of course, the biggest reason for me is going to be that defense. Do I expect them to have as many turnovers as last year? No. But they still are going to turn over the other team quite a bit. They have a lot of opportunistic playmakers on the back end of their defense. They have never had that in the past 10 years on the Dallas Cowboys defense. They have never had a ball-hawking safety, have never had a ball-hawking corner. They didn't believe in them. They cut them. They did not want them on their roster. Now they have Trayvon Diggs, and while he may give up a touchdown every now and again, he's still going to be able to turn over the other team quite a bit. I expect Micah Parsons to elevate this year. He had 13 sacks last year. I'm hoping for about 17, 18 sacks this year. He is that special of a talent. Now that they don't have Randy Gregory, I expect him to rush the passer a little bit more. His rush rate last year was the lowest in the NFL as for players who played that many snaps, and yet he had the highest sack percentage on that guys. But for me, the defense for the Cowboys is the reason why I still believe they have a chance to win this division. In fact, I'm picking them to win this division. I think there are a lot more solid answers for me at the quarterback spot in Prescott, at the wide receiver spot in Lamb, tight end in Schultz, O-line in Zach Martin, and so that's why I'm picking them. I just can't pick Jalen Hurts to win that division. I just can't do it. I want to see him do it or actually win the division this year before I pick him next year. But for my money, I still think the Cowboys walk away with it and win the division. The NFC is basically a cakewalk this year. If you're one of the top 2 teams in your division, you should pretty much be in consideration for a playoff spot this year. And the Cowboys are right there with the Eagles. The Eagles' defense is improved. They did bring in C.J. Gardner-Johnson just before the league year started, or just before the beginning of the season this year, from the Saints anyway. I wonder how good that defense is going to be. They should also be a little bit more opportunistic, but they've brought in pieces that have failed on other teams. James Bradbury from the Giants anyway. They brought in C.J. Gardner-Johnson anyway from the Saints. He's on a final year of his deal. That's why he was not still on the Saints anyway. They wanted to go ahead and move on from him and not lose him for nothing in free agency. So I wonder how that defense is going to gel as the season goes on. But that offensive line for the Eagles worries me because of the turnover that they have, trying to mix old and young players. It didn't work out so well. Last year, Hurts kind of covered up a lot of those issues because of his mobility. But again, this offense is only going to go as far as Jalen Hurts takes him, and I'm picking Jalen Hurts to falter just because I don't think he can throw the ball down the field with any type of accuracy, and we'll see how that plays out this year. But for me, Cowboys 1, Eagles 2, Commanders 3, Giants 4. On to the NFC North. Now, everybody seems to be picking the Green Bay Packers. Did we not just watch them lose their best receiver in Davante Adams? And we've seen how Aaron Rodgers does with wide receivers he doesn't trust. He doesn't throw them the ball, and he doesn't come from behind either. So this is going to be a very different year for the Green Bay Packers in the NFC North. But let's start at the bottom of the division. The bottom of the division, of course, the last couple of years has been the Bears and Lions, and I still think that's the case. But for me, 4th place goes to the Chicago Bears. They brought in Eberflus, a defensive mind. I think he's a great defensive mind. However, they have a ton of change on that defensive front, and that's the strength of their team the last several years. And I think it's going to take some time before that defense is very good again. Eberflus is trying to influence that roster, try to get the players he wants up front, and I think it's going to be at least 2 years before you see that defense become elite again. On the offensive side of the ball, I was hoping that they would bring in an offensive-minded head coach. Obviously, they did not. Justin Fields is going to suffer for that, and they didn't really do much at the wide receiver spot to help him out. In fact, they got rid of Allen Robinson, allowing him to go in free agency to the LA Rams. I'm sorry, I just don't see the production there. Mooney's going to be their top target from a receiver. They have Kmet as a tight end. Nobody that really scares me. David Montgomery is a decent running back, but they're the 4th best team in that division. Sorry, Chicago Bears fans. The Bears are the worst team in that division by a mile. Now, the Detroit Lions are significantly improved on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. I think both sides of the ball are better than the Chicago Bears at this point. And yes, I understand Jared Goff is the quarterback. When you keep defenders off of him, he's a league average quarterback. So don't come in here and throw shade saying Goff is the worst quarterback you've ever seen in your life. I mean, there's worse out there. Have you seen Nathan Peterman, who threw 5 interceptions in a first half for the Buffalo Bills years ago? I mean, he still has a job in the NFL, and the Bears actually were the ones to give him a job this year. Ugh. Anyway, the Detroit Lions have a lot of money invested in that offense. I think it's the most money invested on one side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball in the league this year. They have a couple of good receivers. They have DeAndre Swift, who's back healthy again. They should be a very nice team this year. Thank you for joining us, Clay and Sebastian. But for me, the Lions are the third best team in this division. Aiden Hutchinson's going to bring some respect to that defense again. They've been a sieve the last couple of years. Their defensive coordinator, as much as he would scheme it just right, he would always have a player out of position, and that just tells you how bad the Lions' defense has been the last several years. That defensive line is going to be very good anyway with Aiden Hutchinson there. They've invested a lot of money in that offensive line as well, and so I expect this team to probably get to 7, maybe even 8 wins, bordering on playoff contention in the NFC. You have to stick around to the end of this video to find out how that's going to go. But for my money, the Lions are easily the third best team in that division. Second goes to the Green Bay Packers. I'm sorry you can't have that much changeover with a veteran quarterback taking up that much money on your salary. You lose to Zadarius Smith anyway, or Zadarius. I want to say it's Smith. I could be wrong. He goes to the Vikings anyway, but the Packers are still going to have a very good defense. They're still going to have a great running game anyway with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. They're going to have some breakout performances from the wide receiver spot just because they don't have anybody. I just don't think they're good enough offensively to be able to get the job done. Aaron Rodgers is going to try to force the issue. When he does, he throws interceptions. How many times have we seen Aaron Rodgers throw interceptions in the past? Almost never. Aaron Rodgers is very secure with the ball, and he doesn't have anybody he can really trust at the wide receiver spot. You can tell me Allen Lazard. You can tell me Randall Cobb. You can tell me the ghost of Sammy Watkins. I'm not buying it. I think the best wide receiver on your team is Romeo Doubs, or however you want to pronounce it, by the end of the year. Christian Watson, I think, could be your number 2 by the end of the year. Allen Lazard works best as the third best receiver in that lineup. I just don't think they've got enough to get it done. As far as the offensive line, they still got the pieces in front of him, so I still think they're going to be able to run the ball and be very effective. I think Rodgers will still own the Chicago Bears. But when it comes to week 1 and they're going to the Minnesota Vikings, I think the Minnesota Vikings are going to show them what's up. That defense, while it's not necessarily as good as it's been with Mike Zimmer now no longer being there, that offense is going to be so much better with Minnesota now that they've got an offensive mind at head coach in Kevin O'Connell. They've got, trying to remember his name, Dalvin Cook at running back, of course. They improved their receiver room just because they brought in Kevin O'Connell as head coach. They're going to throw the ball a lot more. Adam Thielen was still a very good receiver last year, even with Justin Jefferson taking so many targets last year. KJ Osborne is going to be a legitimate threat as far as a receiver as well, for those of you interested in fantasy. He could be a third receiver out of this offense that puts up numbers. We'll see how they do. But this is going to be a much better offensive team. You're probably going to be looking at a lot more shootouts this year than you have been in the past with the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings under Mike Zimmer were more of, defense first, hand the ball off on first down, hand the ball off on second down, hand the ball off on third down, and hey, hand the ball off on fourth down. I don't even want to see a punt. That's the thought process of Mike Zimmer. Fault it all you want. That's what he wanted to see. He didn't want to see turnovers, and so that's why they ran the ball so much, and that's why Dalvin Cook was so important. Now, he's still going to be very important to this team, but now we're really going to see the new modern NFL come in on that offensive side of the ball, and that's going to be just the thing the Vikings need to be able to take the division this year. Even with the Vikings not having a very good defense, I don't even think they have a top 15 defense. I don't even think they have a top 20 defense. But I think by the end of the season, that the offensive improvements are enough to be better than the Green Bay Packers. Even as good as of a defense the Green Bay Packers are going to have this year, I think the Packers are just going to be that limited offensively. It's going to hold them back enough to let the Vikings finally take the division, and so I think they're assured a playoff spot by winning the division. Moving on to the NFC South. At the bottom of the division, you have the Saints and Falcons and Panthers all vying for that bottom spot. I'm sorry, I just don't think Tom Brady is ever going to finish 4th in a division. So Falcons, for my money, are the worst team in this division. Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder don't exactly inspire a lot of confidence. Big years for Kyle Pitts. Big year possibly for Drake London. We'll see if he can really take off. But the Falcons are easily the worst team in this division. Arthur Smith's job is absolutely not safe. No matter how much he wants to say that his job is safe for at least the next couple of years, as he keeps mentioning in press conferences over the past year, I don't buy it. You'll have to pay attention to the end of the video to see all the coaches that are going to be fired by the end of the season, in my estimation. But Arthur Smith is probably the most assuredly the first coach to be fired this season. I just don't think he's a very good coach to begin with. The decision to trade away Matt Ryan obviously hurts this team as far as being able to be competitive this year. And I just think it's this. This is the year they're going to try to build back with a better quarterback next year and try to get the number one pick. But Kyle Pitts should have a monster year. If you're paying attention in fantasy, make sure you draft him as possibly your second best tight end in the entire NFL behind only Travis Kelce. And for those of you who are Mark Andrews fans, I think Kyle Pitts is going to have a better year just because of the target share he's going to have in that Atlanta Falcons offense. Third goes to the New Orleans Saints. While they have a great defense, that offense, I just don't buy into Jameis Winston. I'm not buying into Michael Thomas. I'm not buying into Alvin Kamara. Kamara last year, when healthy, was 2 yards in a pile of dust. You saw when they didn't have a quarterback with Taysom Hill and Bridgewater over the last couple of years. Simeon, Ian Book never was pushed so far down the roster they wouldn't even start him when they had three quarterbacks out. Jameis Winston had injury issues and interception issues. I just don't see the bright light at the end of the tunnel for the New Orleans Saints on the offensive side of the ball. Now the defense, they're going to be lights out. They're still going to give Tom Brady issues. I mean, they're going to be in the game with the Buccaneers just because of how good they are at defending against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But they're still not even in that top two of that division in my mind. I just don't see it offensively. Michael Thomas has missed the last couple of years, has gotten into it with coaches, has a very unstable ankle. I just don't think he's going to be able to get through 4 games without missing significant time this year. And so on the outside, Chris Olave is going to really have to prove himself. That receiver room is going to have to do something. Jarvis Landry's there now. Because of Michael Thomas, I think he's going to be out probably after week 4 due to injury, or he's going to get into it with the coaches, and he's going to demand a trade, throw his helmet at somebody. That's the kind of thing we've come to expect from Michael Thomas, not necessarily the 100-plus catches in a season that he was with Drew Brees. And so I think the New Orleans Saints are just not going to be very good this year on the offensive side. As far as a win total, Falcons I'm expecting to probably be around 2, maybe 3 wins. For the Saints, I'm going to go ahead and give them 6, maybe 7 wins at this point, just because that offense is going to hold them back so much. Even in the NFC, there's not a lot of great teams out there. You could tell me that, maybe they get lucky and get to 8 wins, but for my money, I think they're at 7-10 is their record at the end of the season, and we'll see how this goes over the next couple of years. I think they're going to miss Sean Payton. I think they're going to regret trading that pick anyway to the Eagles last year, this past draft anyway. They could use that pick to go ahead and move up in the draft to get a quarterback. I think that was a little bit of a mistake, giving the Eagles the flexibility that the Saints should have. But for my money, the Saints are the third best team. That means the Carolina Panthers are the second best team, possibly saving Matt Rule's job. Again, you'll have to pay attention to the end of the video to see if he sticks around through or after the season anyway. But for my money, Baker Mayfield is a huge step up from what they did. Michael Thomas has been getting it with coaches. He hasn't necessarily been swinging a helmet, but that kind of thing. But Michael Thomas had his issues with the coaching staff. Dennis Allen is now the head coach there. He's since smoothed things over with the coaching staff. I'm not sure if everything's been resolved, though, within the organization because of what Michael Thomas has done. And even just setting that stuff aside, the injury issues, I just don't think that's a very stable ankle. And to count on him for anything more than a few games this year is ludicrous. But second best team is the Carolina Panthers. The injury issue to McCaffrey, of course, you have to worry about, but he's still going to be a very effective runner. I think they're still going to have an effective rushing game now that they have Baker Mayfield under center. He operates best with a good running attack, and they should have a good rushing attack. Their defense, they have playmakers in the secondary, good tacklers in that linebacker core. They're always turning over that defensive line, and they always find 1 or 2 good standouts every year. So that defense should be very good for Matt Rule. I think their floor this year is 8 wins. I think the consistency that they're going to have at quarterback is the biggest reason why they're going to see the improvement. You saw last year with them constantly tinkering with that quarterback spot. Matt Rule will not have the option to go ahead and say, hey, Sam Darnold, I just don't like the way you're throwing the ball this half. Even though you haven't thrown an interception, our offense isn't moving it. I'm putting in P.J. Walker. That's not happening this year. Baker Mayfield's your starter, and he's going to stay in the game. And I don't think Matt Rule is going to be allowed to tinker with that offense as much as he has been the last 2 years. Cam Newton's, of course, not there. Darnold's going to be out for a significant period of time. But Baker Mayfield, while he's not necessarily my favorite quarterback, he's not in the top 15 for me. He is very consistent, and that's kind of what you can expect. He's a poor man's Russell Wilson, if you will. And I think that's good enough for second place in the NFC South. I think that gives them a little bit better quarterback than Jameis Winston on the Saints. The defense, while not necessarily as good as the Saints, I think has more playmakers in that secondary, more ball hawks that will go after that interception, and we'll see how they do. But the Carolina Panthers, for me, will finish second in that division. As far as a win total, I'm expecting probably 10 wins. I think they're going to end with a winning record and be a borderline playoff team just because of, again, how bad the NFC is. But I really like the change that they made at quarterback. Actually having some consistency is the biggest reason why I think they're going to finish as the number 2 team. Do I think Baker Mayfield's going to light the world on fire as a quarterback? No. Don't get me wrong. Don't get my words confused. I just think that he's going to be consistent enough at quarterback compared to Sam Darnold, and consistent enough compared to P.J. Walker, consistent enough compared to Cam Newton, that it's going to force Matt Rule to stick within the entire game and not have to this turnover, roll the dice, who's going to play this drive, who's going to play that drive kind of thing that they had last year. And so that's the biggest reason why the Panthers are going to be so much better than they were last year. First, without question, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tom Brady, do I need to elaborate? I guess I'll say at least a few more words about him. Their defense, I think they're still going to come down just a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. They're not necessarily as good as they were a year ago. On the offensive side of the ball, Brady's a year older. They have 4 good receivers. I think Gronk probably ends up there by the end of the year. I think Tom Brady around week 11, week 12 is going to go to Gronk's house and say, hey, Gronk, time to get off the couch, stop eating the potato chips, come out here and let's win another Super Bowl. I think that's probably what's going to happen later on this season. But as far as the division, this is easily the Tampa Bay Buccaneers division. The hardest games they're going to have in division are against the Saints, and that's just because of the defense. But this is easily Tom Brady's year in that division, and that's part of the reason why I think Tom Brady came back. He's got a real chance to get the bye this year because of how easy that division is going to be for that team. And so the Buccaneers are easily number 1, Panthers 2, Saints 3, and Falcons 4. Last division that we haven't gone over is the NFC West. Most difficult division by far in the NFC in my mind, just because of the 2 teams at the top. But let's start at the bottom. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks are number 4 for me. I mean, you have Geno Smith at quarterback. You have Drew Lock as the backup. I think Geno Smith's going to be terrible by week 5. I think they're going to have to put in Drew Lock just to see if they can get a spark. He has the ability to throw the ball down the field, and even though he's inaccurate, he can at least move the ball. I think it's still not going to win games for them. I think you're looking at probably a 2 to 4 win team here. Pete Carroll probably is going to be gone either by his own volition or by just wanting a changing of the guard there in Seattle. They're going to bring in a quarterback next season. We'll see how it goes. They're going to have nice draft capital for the next several years because of that trade with Russell Wilson. They have nice pieces on both sides of the ball. Noah Fant, Shelby Harris that they got, but they need a lot more pieces than that. Remember the trade for Jamal Adams that they made with the Jets? Could that trade look any worse? I mean, look at what they gave up to the Jets in order to get him. Safeties do not get traded for first-round picks. Very rarely do they do, and when you do, you don't give away multiple picks. You don't give them the big, huge contract on top of that. The one exception that actually has worked out is Minkah Fitzpatrick with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, Jamal Adams is a very good, high-energy player, kind of the leader on that defense, and they need a leader now that Bobby Wagner's gone. But that was probably the worst decision that organization could make, and that's part of the reason why Russell Wilson's gone. Reports coming out today as Russell Wilson prepares to go up against his former team, that reports are not coming out that Russell Wilson was very upset a few years back when the Seahawks were scouting Mahomes and Allen and quarterbacks that were coming up in the draft to try to find his replacement as he ages. Understandably, as an organization, I have a responsibility to make sure my team is still good. But yes, this was absolutely the worst trade the Seattle Seahawks could have made with Jamal Adams, and then coupling that with the decision to try to find a replacement for him and not talking to Russell Wilson first and just saying, hey, we're still going to stick by you, don't get me wrong. They made that mistake, and of course they were in on the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. We saw that all this past year. Russell Wilson was going to get out. It was just a matter of time. Broncos were willing to make the trade and be able to get the pieces done, or have the pieces to be able to get the deal done with the Seahawks. But the Seahawks are easily the worst team in this division. Third goes to the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to start out great. Don't get me wrong. Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray, they always start out great. But by the end of the season, they had a massive losing streak at the end of last season. I don't see the reason why that's any different this year. They're going to start the season without DeAndre Hopkins. That tells me they're going to get off to a little bit worse of a start than last year. So they're not going to have that big cushion like they did last year as a 13-0 team, losing the first game to Green Bay and then losing like 5 straight to end the season. Sorry, not buying it. The Cardinals, for me, are easily the third best team just because Kyler Murray, for me, is very limited at the quarterback position. The running back position there with James Conner, I think, is elite. A very underrated runner in James Conner after his years with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Very effective in the red zone anyway. Cliff Kingsbury is very predictable in the red zone in that he wants to run the ball. Other NFL teams are going to know this year. We'll see if James Conner still stays very effective. I think he will be. If you paid any attention to my fantasy football lives that I've done over the past week, he is still one of my top 10 rushers in fantasy this year. I think he's just that good, has that good of a knack for finding the end zone. But Cliff Kingsbury does not throw the ball in the red zone, and I think he's going to have to introduce some variety in that offense. They lost Chase Edmonds to the Miami Dolphins. As far as receivers, they lost Christian Kirk. They did bring in Marquise Brown. That does nothing for me. He has a case of the drops anyway coming over from the Ravens. Maybe there's a little bit of a connection between Kyler Murray and Brown from college, but are you seriously telling me that's the difference between them getting the number 1 seed over the Rams or the 49ers? Sorry, I'm not buying it. The defense got a little bit worse as well this year, and so I just don't think there's enough there for the Cardinals to overcome. Kingsbury, while he's a good offensive mind, a lot of people questioned the hire at the time. Things seemed to work out the first couple of years with Kyler Murray. I just wonder if it's just not enough in order for him to keep his job. Again, pay attention to the end of this video to find out about that. But for me, they're easily the third best team. Second goes to Trey Lance and the 49ers, solely because Trey Lance is a rookie quarterback. And while that roster is a Super Bowl roster, and I think they're easily a playoff team this year, that quarterback spot worries me. The flexibility at running back is a little bit less now with Elijah Mitchell. I don't really see the backup there having any type of a real role. Kittle as a tight end is going to have a great year as a security blanket. Deebo Samuel in the rushing game is going to be great. Kyle Shanahan's amazing. Don't give me Brandon Ayuk. I just don't buy it. How many years are we going to say, this guy's really got it, and then he only provides enough offense for you in like 2 or 3 games? I really like Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup, though, and so that's why, for me, just like Sebastian just said, the upside is that quarterback spot, the floor is so high that they're going to be a great team no matter what they do. I think they're still going to be behind the LA Rams just because the LA Rams are just loaded on the offensive side of the ball. Not necessarily as much as they were last year. On the defensive side of the ball, they have a couple of losses as well. Von Miller going to Buffalo. I wonder if OBJ is going to come back before the season starts, at least signing a deal. It sounds like he won't be playing football at least until November, but it sounds like there might be some mutual interest between the two teams. The other team, of course, in the sweepstakes was Buffalo, but for my money, I'm going to bet on the Rams ending up with OBJ. Bobby Wagner coming in for the Rams, I think really solidifies that back end, even with the loss of Von Miller. We'll see how this year goes for the Rams, but for my money, I still think the Rams are just a tick above where the 49ers are. But for that division anyway, Rams 1, 49ers 2, Cardinals 3, and the Seahawks 4. But I do think Lance is going to have an amazing year. I think the worries that we had about him last year being the next Jordan Love are completely unfounded. I think he's significantly better than Jordan Love ever could hope to be. But I think he's better than Dak Prescott or Lamar Jackson? Remains to be seen. Do I think he's better than Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, any one of these other quarterbacks that are out there? Possibly, but we still haven't seen it enough. I want to see a full season before we really write the book on Trey Lance, and maybe even a second season. But for my money, that 49ers team is still going to be very, very good with Shanahan at the helm. I think as far as win total, for the Cardinals, I'm looking at 9 wins. 9-8 for the Cardinals. For the 49ers, I think you're looking at an 11 or 12 win team for the 49ers. And the Rams, I think you're looking at a 13 win team, 13-4 and 12-5 for the Niners. So your division winners easily into the postseason, the AFC: Bills, Bengals, Colts, and Chiefs. On the NFC side, you got the Cowboys, Vikings, Buccaneers, and Rams. So let's go ahead and go on to the playoff seeding anyway. Division winners, of course, in the AFC: Bills, Colts, Chiefs, and Bengals. That's kind of how I have the order for them. The Colts, I think, are going to beat up on their division a little bit, and so with Matt Ryan, they should win the games that they're supposed to win, and so they're going to have a little bit easier road to the postseason. I think they're probably going to be looking at 12 to 13 wins this year because of their scheduling. Bills, though, I think are just that much better than everybody else in the league, even with a tougher schedule. I still think they end up with a bye in the AFC. For the 3 seed, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, and 4, the Bengals. I just think that Chiefs are still going to be very good. Andy Reid's going to find a way to win enough games to get them the 3 seed, but they're not going to be able to get all the way up to the Bills level. And as far as the wild cards, 3 wild cards in the AFC. There were a couple of teams I was thinking about, but we'll start at the number 5. 5 for me is the Chargers. I think they're a very strong team. That division is very strong. I really like what they've done on both sides of the ball. The injury issues are the reason why I kept the Chiefs ahead of them in that division, but they are really talented, and they're going to be right there with the Chiefs, and I think they're going to have the best wild card record. 6th goes to the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to have a little bit of rust anyway with the injury issue guys coming back, and that's why I don't think they're going to win the division over the Bengals, but I still think they're a very good team. Lamar Jackson's going to want to prove it in a contract year that he's worth every single penny, and so I think they're going to be the 6th seed. For the 7th spot, there were a number of teams that I was thinking about. The Titans possibly, the Steelers possibly, the Dolphins were in consideration, and the Raiders, but for me, the Miami Dolphins just have the easier road, and so I think their record's going to be a little bit better. And so for me, the Miami Dolphins are going to get the 7th seed in the AFC. That means the Raiders are going to miss the postseason, the Broncos are going to miss the postseason, the Steelers, the Titans, the Patriots are all going to be out of this year's playoffs along with the Cleveland Browns. On the NFC side, division winners: Rams, Bucks, Cowboys, and Vikings. That's exactly how I have the order. I think the Rams are going to have the best record. Buccaneers are going to be right there with them. I know Brady's going to want the bye. I just don't think he's going to be able to quite get there. I think they're going to struggle early on. In fact, I have the Cowboys beating them on Sunday Night Football. We saw how good of a game it was last year, even though both teams are a little bit worse than they were last year when they met in that fantastic Sunday Night Football game to open the season. I still have the Dallas Cowboys winning this game because of that defense. Brady, I think, is going to be a little bit rusty coming back just because of all that time he missed in the preseason. He's still trying to get on the same page with his new receivers and Russell Gage and Julio Jones. That interior offensive line having injury issues is going to be a problem. And even though Dallas over the years has not been able to stop the run very well, I think this year, or in this game anyway, they're going to play very well against that interior offensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette, if you paid any attention to my fantasy videos, I think he's fool's gold in this year's fantasy football. I think you should be drafting him as running back 30 and not running back 10. I think he's just going to be that bad. I think he's going to lose his job by week 6. I just don't think he can run behind this offensive line, and even if the offensive line was intact, I still don't think he's a great NFL running back. I think Brady's going to want more of a pass-catching back out of that backfield, and so that's who I think is going to be the starter going forward in Tampa Bay. But for my money, Rams are just a tick above the Buccaneers as far as how that schedule is going to play out for them and win totals. So I expect the Rams to take number 1. Bucks are going to be number 2. 3, the Cowboys, and 4, the Vikings. The Vikings, while they're going to have a much better offense, I think they're going to lose the occasional game that they should win just because of how bad that defense is going to be and the adjustments that they're going to have to make offensively early on. We'll see how good O'Connell is with Cousins. They've worked together before with the Washington Redskins, so I expect there to be some familiarity, but I expect there's going to be some rough patches in the season at some point, and so I expect the Vikings to end up with the 4 seed. 5 goes to the 49ers. Obviously, I just told you how good of a roster the 49ers have. I think they're the first wild card easily. Second, or the sixth spot in the NFC, the second wild card spot goes to the Green Bay Packers. I still think Aaron Rodgers, that defense is still just that good. I still think that division, they're going to be able to run that division however they want. And I think they're going to get just enough wins, probably in that 10-win range, to get into the postseason. The final team in the postseason for me, the choices for me were going to be the Panthers, the Cardinals, The Eagles and the Lions were all going to be in contention anyway for that final wild card spot out in the NFC. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be able to get there. They're just going to fade down the stretch anyway. The Panthers, for me, are a very good team. We'll get into them in just a second. The Lions, I think they're going to be improved, but I don't think they're going to be in playoff contention by the final 2 weeks of the season. I think they'll be there up until that point, though. And then the Eagles, like I mentioned, I just don't believe in Jalen Hurts. And the only reason their win total is going to have them in playoff contention is just because of how bad, one, the division is, and two, how bad the NFC is. I think they're probably going to finish with 8 to 9 wins, but I think they're going to be on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. So that means the Carolina Panthers are your final team to make the postseason in the NFC. Every year we see a surprise team, and I think that's the Panthers this year. I just really like the consistency that they're going to have at quarterback, and so I think they're going to lock up that number 7 seed in the NFC. So just for you guys to refresh your memories, my division winners: Bills, Bengals, Colts, and Chiefs in the AFC. On the NFC, Cowboys, Vikings, Bucks, and Rams. And then your AFC playoff picture looks like Bills, Colts, Chiefs, Bengals, Chargers, Ravens, and Dolphins 1 through 7. On the NFC, Rams, Bucks, Cowboys, Vikings, 49ers, Packers, and Panthers. Now, as far as the playoffs go, of course, the Bills and Rams would get the bye. So on the AFC side, I have the Dolphins actually upsetting the Colts on the road. I think they have that many good playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. The improvements that they made on the offensive side should be enough to win a playoff game. My question, of course, is still Tua Tagovailoa. Can he ascend to the next great quarterback in the NFL, or are we going to finally see if he's just not good enough and they move on at quarterback? But either way, I still think they have a good enough roster to beat the Colts in the postseason. Chiefs are going to beat the Ravens. I can't see Lamar Jackson beating Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs at this point in their career. I mean, Mahomes, I think, is not going to be home run dependent this year, and so they're going to be able to move the ball more consistently against that Ravens front. And I just really like the way the Chiefs are setting up for the postseason this year, not relying on the home run and Tyreek Hill. I think there's so much to be said for that. Not enough people are talking about Tyreek Hill, the loss of Tyreek Hill, and what that means for their offense, how it has to evolve and change. Not having that guy who can get open 60 yards down the field, and even though Mahomes can throw it that far, how often do we see that actually hit? Quite a bit, but not consistent enough to make first down after first down after first down, run clock, get CEH going, invest in over the middle with Travis Kelce when you need a 3rd and 7, something like that. Instead, they're looking for big play, 20-yard seam route to Kelce, 50-yard home run route to Tyreek Hill, quick screen to Tyreek Hill and hope he can make a man miss and then break it to the end zone. That offense is going to be gone this year for Andy Reid. It's now going to be more of a traditional offense this year, and I think that works in the Chiefs' favor. Last, I have the Chargers actually upsetting the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the roster is just that good for the Chargers. As long as they're healthy, I think the improvements that they made really will prove themselves in that game against the Bengals. The Chargers did get a little snake bit last year at the end of the season, field goal issues, etc. And the Bengals, while I think they're improved, I think they were a little bit above their heads last year, and I think they're going to need another year to kind of come down from what they did last year. And so I think they're going to end up losing the game against the Chargers. I think the Chargers are just going to be a little bit hungrier for that win. On the NFC side, I have the Buccaneers defeating the Panthers quite easily, but a good year for the Panthers overall. Cowboys, I have defeating the Packers. The defense is the reason for that. By the end of the season, those rookie wide receivers are going to be playing much better for Green Bay, don't get me wrong. And Aaron Rodgers has beaten the Cowboys twice in the playoffs in recent memory. I just don't think it happens a third time. McCarthy, while he's not exactly the world's greatest head coach, I still think he's a good enough head coach in this situation where he realizes, hey, as long as I don't turn over the ball on offense with Dak Prescott, I still have a good running back in Ezekiel Elliott. I can run behind Zach Martin. I got an elite receiver in CeeDee Lamb. I got a better tight end in Dalton Schultz than they have on their side. This defense is elite and playmakers all over the field. If I just allow them to play their game, they should be able to take this game at home against Green Bay. And so I think the Cowboys win that one. Last game, of course, is the Vikings versus the 49ers. This was a very tough one for me. What ultimately decided it for me was that Trey Lance would be the starting quarterback in this game versus Kirk Cousins. And while Kirk Cousins doesn't exactly light the world on fire, I think he's going to be significantly better with Kevin O'Connell, and that offense is going to be much better. The defense should, at that point in time, at least have some cohesion, at least be respectable, and not just be an absolute sieve like I think they will be at the beginning of the season. But that 49ers team, I think, is going to be held back by Trey Lance, a pressure-packed environment. I think he's going to falter in that spot. It's going to be no slight on the roster for the 49ers. In fact, I think they could be very likely a Super Bowl team next year with Trey Lance. I just think the lights are going to be a little bit too bright for Trey Lance in that spot in Minnesota on the road, hostile environment, and I just don't think he's going to be able to handle it quite as well as everybody thinks. Now, as far as the next round, the Bills are going to be facing the Miami Dolphins. I think Buffalo obviously handles this one quite easily. They're easily the better team. Stephon Diggs, that defense is going to be fantastic. Tre'Davious White's going to be back. Josh Allen, an MVP candidate, in my opinion. He will win the MVP. They will easily take care of business against Miami. The Chiefs, anyway, will face the Chargers. I think the Chiefs handle the Chargers quite easily yet again. I think the Chiefs just have the number of every team in that division, and they have over the last, 10 years now. They've been absolutely fantastic. Andy Reid is just a wizard as a coach, and that's probably where I think this game gets to be decided anyway. Head coach of the Chargers versus head coach of the Chiefs. Give me Andy Reid every single time. As far as the defensive side of the ball, while the improvements are nice for the Chargers, the injury issues that they're going to have during the season will hold them back and force this game to be in Kansas City, in Arrowhead, in the snow, and that's why I think the Chiefs are going to end up winning that game quite easily as well. On the NFC side, the divisional round, Rams will take on the Vikings. Rams easily take this one. This is where McVay basically says, hey, I'm your uncle. I'm your daddy, whatever you want to call it, to the Minnesota Vikings, because Kevin O'Connell came from the McVay system, obviously, and so I think they're really going to assert their will. The defense is so much better of the Rams. The offense is so much better. I just think both sides of the ball and head coaching-wise, the Rams have the advantage. Now, as far as a runner, Dalvin Cook is so much better than anything the Rams are going to have this year. Even if Darrell Henderson takes over that spot anyway, I think he's a much better runner than Cam Akers, but Dalvin Cook's much better. I still think this could be a decent game, but I still think it's a double-digit victory for the Rams, and they easily go on to the championship game. Then it will be Buccaneers versus Cowboys. Now, as much as I would like to say the Cowboys are going to beat them in Week 1, I still don't think that means a darn thing in the postseason. And I think Tom Brady is Tom Brady. By that time, Gronkowski will be there. That defense will be hitting on all cylinders. He'll be much more comfortable with his new receivers. And so I think Tom Brady wins this game going away. Probably a double-digit victory as the Cowboys lose yet again in the postseason. At least they got one victory in the wild card round, but they do not go any further versus Tom Brady. So in your championship series, I have the Bills versus the Chiefs. Everybody remembers how amazing that game was last year. This time, though, I think Josh Allen is a man possessed. He will not be denied, and that team is just a little bit better, I think, overall, especially on the defensive side of the ball with the Buffalo Bills, that I think Buffalo is going to win this game, probably by a score of 54-45, something like that. It's going to be a really high-scoring game, and there's not going to be much defense. Both teams are going to play very, very well, and we'll see how it goes. But for me, Bills are going to take it. Maybe not quite that high of a scoring game, but it's going to be high. It's not going to be a 6-3 game, Alabama LSU championship game in college football all those years ago. But it should be a shootout. But I think the Bills come out ahead. On the NFC side, we saw the game last year: Rams versus Bucks. Rams made a lot of mistakes in the game last year. Did not show very much poise in that game. They obviously knew Tom Brady was on the other side, and that seemed to rattle them. Obviously, they were able to overcome it, still be able to, get the pass to Cooper Kupp over the middle, and what, in my opinion, was an absolute blown call by Todd Bowles. I imagine he's going to learn from that mistake this year. But for me, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers winning this game. I think the offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is what's going to win it. I think the defense is going to do just enough to hold the Rams at bay, hold that running game down, which they did not in that game last year anyway. But for me, Tom Brady is Tom Brady. He's going to get I think he's going to have a chance at his 8th Super Bowl this year. We'll see who ends up winning. You'll have to stick around for that here in just a moment. But for me, Tom Brady is just that good. The weapons that they're going to have, I expect Gronkowski to be back as well. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to get revenge for what happened last year, and it's going to be a great game, but for me, Tom Brady, you can't really go against him. Even as good as the Rams proved themselves to be last year, OBJ is still going to be working himself in from injury, and so I just think there's too much going the Tampa Bay Bucs way in this game for them to be denied. So, your Super Bowl is going to be the Buffalo Bills versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. High scoring game. I think both teams are going to be more of offensively minded. Tom Brady's not going to be denied. Of course, he owns the Buffalo for all those years that he played with the New England Patriots. It's a little bit different of a team, obviously, personnel wise, but the schemes are still very similar with Sean, what's his name? Sean Mc. I can't remember his name anyway. I can see his face, but anyway, still the same coach that was there anyway in his final year there with the New England Patriots. He knows how to attack that defense. He knows the spots that he needs to go to, even with better players being on that roster to play that type of scheme. It should still be a very good game. However, you have Josh Allen on the other side, and again, I just think he's going to play like a man possessed this year. So I have the Buffalo Bills winning the Super Bowl against Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this probably is the final year for Tom Brady if he wins it. I think it's probably the final year if he loses it. So this will probably be the final game in the Super Bowl, and that's kind of fitting for how good of a player he is. It would be storybook for him to win the game, but I picked the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl. As far as a score, I'll give you 38-34. I think it'll be high scoring. A couple of field goals instead of touchdowns for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is probably what's going to be the difference in this game. And so Josh Allen wins it 38-34. MVP, I would guess, is going to be Josh Allen for the season, and I'm going to guess he's going to win it in the Super Bowl as well. Now, as I mentioned, we've already gone over the division winners, Super Bowl winners, wild cards, all that, Super Bowl pick and everything. Last thing I wanted to touch on is the coaches that are going to be fired after the season. I already kind of gave you one. The Atlanta Falcons are easily going to fire the first coach of the season in Arthur Smith. I'd be shocked if he makes it past week 10. In fact, I think he probably gets his walking papers long before that. They're going to need an organizational reset, but we'll see how it goes. Seattle Seahawks. I think there's an outside chance Pete Carroll walks on his own, but I think that's another team that's going to want an organizational reset, especially at the quarterback spot. They're going to want to bring in a younger coach, somebody who can speak to these younger quarterbacks anyway, and I just don't think the philosophy works in Seattle anymore. I think his messaging's long past tired, and so I think as much as Pete Carroll has meant to the city of Seattle, bringing them the Super Bowl, getting back to another one, I just think it's time for Pete Carroll to move on, whether by his own volition or he's gone as fired. The next couple I think could be surprises, but I think if it falls the way I expect it to, these coaches will absolutely be fired. That's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni got off to a very rough start with the Philadelphia fan base. The only reason why he turned around was because they were able to win some games and sneak into the back half of the postseason. This year, though, it's the city of brotherly love that does not hold any brotherly love for losers. And so Nick Sirianni not being able to get into the postseason will cost him his job. And even if the front office wants to keep him, I think they're going to make the move just because they didn't get into the postseason. They're going to look at the quarterback position and say, hey, we're going to reset this as well. We're going to bring in a fresh mindset as well. They did with they got rid of Doug Peterson even after he won them a Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni is going to be on the way out the door if they don't make the postseason this year, and I don't think they will, so I think he's going to be gone. Stefanski, I don't think this is going to be all because of him. I think because Deshaun Watson is going to be out for 12 weeks of the season, because you're going to have Jacoby Brissett as your starter, an inconsistent quarterback play at best, because Baker Mayfield's gone and you don't have that guy that you've worked with for a couple of years now leading the way anyway. They've got a bunch of pieces that they've invested in this team. I think they're going to try to force Stefanski to try to make the postseason in the final 5 weeks of the season with Deshaun Watson. And I just think they're going to be too far back to be able to get in there. And so I think it's going to cost Stefanski his job. They're going to bring Watson in, of course, around week 13 to play against his former team, the Houston Texans. It's going to be too little too late for Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns. And so I think it's the writing's on the wall. Stefanski's likely going to be coaching as a lame duck this year. I think they're going to want a fresh, clean slate with Deshaun Watson. A lot of negative news stories around Deshaun Watson. They're going to want to bring in some fresh stories, some new blood, something for the media to hype up to with a new head coach. They have a bunch of pieces there, a lot of money invested in there, and so they're going to look at Stefanski and say, even with all this money, even with Jacoby Brissett, you should make the playoffs. It's not going to happen, and so it's going to cost him his job. Now, the next few that I'm going to mention, every year you see at least 5 head coaches gone, sometimes 10. Coaches that you don't necessarily expect to be gone, but will just because of their circumstances. First on that list for me, he doesn't deserve to be fired. He absolutely needs to be there. The organization's been a laughing stock as far as how they've run their team for the last several years. Dan Snyder, as an owner, one of the worst in football, one of the worst in the entire professional sports world. But for my money, Ron Rivera is going to be out the door, and Dan Snyder's going to say, he's the reason why I invested in this team. I gave him a better quarterback. He asked for a better quarterback. I gave him one. I gave him a great defense, and they didn't play like one. They ended up third in the division. They didn't even beat the Eagles or the Cowboys in the division. In a year that the NFC is down, we couldn't sneak into the playoffs as a wild card either. Rivera's going to be out. Dan Snyder's going to look at all that reasoning and say, yep, he's out. I don't care what you want, GM. I don't care how much respectability he brings to the franchise. I don't care how great of a defensive mind he is. Rivera is going to be out at the end of the season, and I don't think he deserves it. The Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury, I think with another third-place finish, another season that trails off at the back end of the season, I think you're just going to see another offensive-minded coach come in there to see if they can bring a little bit more out of Kyler Murray. You saw the contract language this year with Kyler Murray and the studying the playbook, etc., set number of hours, that kind of thing, every single day was eventually removed. It tells me that there's a little bit of friction there, at least from a learning perspective, trying to understand the game from Kyler Murray. And I wonder if Cliff Kingsbury is just not the right guy to relay the message to Kyler Murray. Say, hey, it's time to man up and be an adult at the quarterback spot anyway. The organization took it upon themselves to remove that language from the contract and say, oh, we didn't know it was in there. Yeah, you knew it was in there. You wrote it in the contract. That's exactly why you wanted it in there. You were disappointed that the NFL media caught on to it and was like, other quarterbacks don't have this in their contract. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Yeah, we got the message loud and clear exactly what you think of Kyler Murray and his understanding of NFL defenses and your own playbook. And so for my money, Cliff Kingsbury is very likely to be out the door with another third-place finish. Last is going to be Lovie Smith of the Houston Texans. I just don't think they're going to stick around with another older coach anyway. I think they're going to want to bring in another offensive-minded coach, especially if Davis Mills proves to be anything of value as far as a quarterback. And if he doesn't, even more so. I think with a new quarterback coming in, if they decide to draft one next year, they're going to want an offensive mind and try to win that division. Next year, that division is very winnable with the Colts, Matt Ryan. The Titans are going to have a rookie and Willis starting. Lawrence, we'll see if he ends up making it to year 3 with the Jaguars. And then, of course, the Texans are going to be drafting a quarterback or have Mills. They're going to have high expectations for that quarterback spot, and so they're going to want to bring in a head coach. For offensive-minded head coach. So your coaches that will be fired: Arthur Smith, Pete Carroll, Nick Sirianni, Kevin Stefanski, Ron Rivera, Cliff Kingsbury, and Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith is actually, his hometown is like 30 minutes from me, 45 minutes from me, Carthage, Texas. A lot of local radio guys loved the hire when Lovie Smith was announced. Everybody, of course, in national media thought it was going to be Brian Flores. Then we saw the lawsuit and all that kind of thing happen. Brian Flores may end up being the coach next year, but Lovie Smith I don't think is going to last long there in Houston. I think he's one and done at the position. I think he's there to be the adult in the room and provide them with some consistency, some leadership, responsibility, all those types of things at the head coach spot that I don't think they thought they were getting last year from their head coach. But just so you guys can kind of see our Super Bowl predictions again, on the AFC side, our division winners, the Bills, Colts, Chiefs, and Bengals. The wild cards are the Chargers, Ravens, and Dolphins, with the Bills making it to the Super Bowl. On the NFC side, Rams, Bucks, Cowboys, and Vikings, division winners. Wild cards, 49ers, Packers, and Panthers. Bucks making it to the Super Bowl. Bills winning the Super Bowl. And then, of course, the coaches I have fired come from the Falcons, Seahawks, Eagles, Browns, Commanders, Cardinals, and Texans. Thank you guys for joining us. Ran this video a little bit longer than I would have liked, but that's okay. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys want to hit that subscribe button, if you haven't already, hit that like button. Really appreciate that. We'll get into some fantasy football here in about 30 minutes to an hour as soon as I get dinner done. And we'll see you guys here shortly. But thank you guys for joining us for our Super Bowl prediction video, and we'll see you guys in just a few minutes.